So when I started teaching, one of the things I did with my second cohort and all of the cohorts going forward was I started class with this quote. So time is our most valuable and non-renewable resource. And if we want to treat it with respect, we need to set priorities. And part of this is because I'm also a certified life coach. So we started going into class with a different mentality. I would tell them this quote and I would say, congratulations, all of you have picked up a second job, at least part-time job, that you now have to balance with your other priorities. And this is where andragogy kind of enters. So andragogy, when we think about it, it's a self-concept. They need to know what experiences they're going to have. It needs to be very problem focused in the classroom. And the students are a different breed than our normal students. They're internally motivated. And at the doctoral level, it's a very high demand of, I need this now. So the other thing was they needed to know why they needed to know something. So what I did was in the class, I took a PowerPoint and recorded like our previous person was talking about. And I went through, this is how you use the library. These are all the resources that are available. And then they would come to their next class with all the strategies that they used. And they would ask specific questions that they were having trouble with our reference librarian. So I don't know how your doctoral classes are set up, but our students can watch the lecture. They are not required to come to class. So the library reference instruction session that I embedded into the class is the session that we have a full house, and it is the most successful class session that I have all semester as far as turnout for the actual class. And, you know, I say successful because I'm measuring this as most of these students have full-time jobs. They're in different time zones and they all are consistently making time to come to this reference instruction class. So I really think it's a huge deal. So from the reference librarian perspective, she stays in the class, Miss Bird, which is here today, she stays in our class for about an hour and a half. And I open it up at the beginning, explain what they're doing, and then I log out and let her have free reign. And I've tried it both ways. I just kind of want to note that I, as the instructor, logged out so my students felt comfortable asking questions. It is recorded, but there's just something about having your professor there. Many of the students say that they feel a little nervous asking questions. So I kind of want to talk really briefly about core beliefs and goal setting and how it all ties in with andragogy. So again, we're going to go back to that sense of self. So the core beliefs, and I go over this in class because again, we're going back to andragogy. What's in it for me mentality with our advanced students. So core beliefs. They are our values, our thoughts, our words, and habits that are developed over time, you know, on a conscious and unconscious level. So why are these important? So you need to know what your core beliefs are because they develop your habits, your beliefs, and your behaviors. So how do we connect it to goal development in the classroom? And this is kind of where it gets a little tricky. So for it to really all tie in together, goals should be collected. They should be connected to the core beliefs to provide meaning. So you want to make sure when you're talking about the core beliefs in the classroom, it can be really quick. Just remind them it needs to be something. The goal should be connected to who you are, what's important to you, but be specific and measurable and achievable. So on the PhD level, again, we go back to that quote about time. It needs to be time bound so they can establish personal accountability. And in some cases, I will say emotional stability because some of the students get very emotional trying to do this 3-year project. And again, we're guiding them. So as the teacher, you're guiding them. And then as the reference librarian, you're setting yourself up for success because these students are going to keep coming back to you. And I can say from personal experience, it's created really good connections between the faculty and the reference librarian, because you're putting your name out there and they know you're a credible source and they're saying how beneficial this is. So in the classroom, I'm tying all this, to andragogy and life coaching through the core belief development and goal setting. So I know I don't have a lot of time, but I briefly want to talk about what the results are of this, because it's really interesting. I've had 5 cohorts after that first cohort. I can say confidently that I am one of 2 people, I'll say I'm in the top 2, to have students graduate early at a very high rate. So I've had half of my class graduate early from the program, and I really think it's because of the way I've designed this session, where you introduce the reference instruction librarian component, and they're approaching their research differently for their chapter 2. And by chapter 2, I mean their literature review, which, is anywhere from 40 to 80 pages, just depending on the type of study you're doing. And it has been extremely successful. So one of the things I wanted to talk about for deployment is deployment in the reference instruction session. So I've told you my personal experience from the instructor side, but how do we successfully deploy that in the reference instruction session? So I, as the instructor, I'm asking them to come prepared so they don't waste their time. And I actually phrase it like that, because again, it's about self and what's in it for them. They can ask for help, specifically related to their topic. So that's where you're going to come into play. So I like to remind the students, if I'm also doing one of these reference instruction sessions, hey, we're here. I know you've got your specific questions. What is your specific problem that we need to address? Also, even though I've implemented, a pre-recorded video, and I also show them, I like to go over in the first 30 seconds, why this is important to achieving their overall goal, which is to successfully defend their dissertation. So how does this all connect? So big picture. I also like to discuss the tools and additional resources that may be helpful to them, specifically dissertations and theses, so that they can look at examples. They can also email their departments, because everybody has a different layout of what they require. Survey databases, though, such as CiteTest, I always point those out, and interlibrary loan, because in most cases, that's going to be one of their best resources. So when we're talking about how to pitch this to faculty or pitch it to your graduate school, I've been asking my students for feedback, and you could do this as the reference instruction librarian, or you could do this as, the faculty member. I'm kind of seeing both, because I've been relaying the information to our reference librarian saying, I'm getting exceptional feedback from my students about how much this helped them or what they would like to see in the future. So again, I would save all of that information, and I have been sharing it with our graduate school dean to kind of see how we could make this trend continue in all of our graduate school courses. Okay, any questions? I'm a little over time. And okay.
So I want to say, I'm not going to ask a question. I'm just going to make a comment, because I'm going to be that person. I am the reference instruction librarian who comes into her classes. And one thing that really helps me, and something that y'all can maybe do with your classes, is that she gives them a little preview of the library beforehand. So I don't spend as much time going over the basics, and the students can really dive right into their questions. And if that's something that you can kind of incorporate to, maybe a little intro video to just the website, something like that, I think that really helps.
Yeah. I, for some reason, cannot see my Zoom screen anymore. So I'm going to trust, oh, I have everybody up now. It's because I minimized it earlier. I'm going to find a way to maximize it so I can stop talking. But are there any other questions about implementing this for your graduate program? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Whitney.
Thanks, Whitney. Esther, are you ready?
Yes, hang on just a sec. This will stuff us. Okay. Okay. All right. Oh, here we go. So you see my slides now?
Yes, you're good,
Okay,
Esther.
great. Thanks. I am Esther French. I'm here at the West Kentucky Teach Meet over in Christian County today, and I'm in the sort of chill out room talking to you all. So if anybody comes in and starts talking, that's why. Today, what I'm going to do is talk to you about some KYVL information literacy resources that we've shared a little bit about before at LERT, and I'm just going to get you updated about those, how far we've come in our process and how you can participate. So I am a instruction librarian at SkyCTC in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and I work with one of the things that I do is I co-chair with Caroline Manny, the KYVL information literacy work group. So what we do is we kind of our purpose is to elevate information literacy across the state. So by sort of using and sharing KYVL resources and lessons on information literacy that go with those resources. So one of the major tasks that we have is to accept and review submissions to our InfoLit gallery. So we've created this gallery, a lot of work has gone into that. And what I'm doing is I am sort of reminding people about the gallery and making sure that you all know how to submit and kind of showing you what we've got so far. So what the gallery is it's basically housed with the Kentucky Digital Library, and I'll show you the page in just a sec. It's a repository of shareable materials. So, and these are connected to your K through 12 standards and also to the ACRL standards. So we've got a range of resources, and these are all created by librarians, teachers, to sort of promote this sharing idea of these resources to help students find, evaluate, and use information. So I'm going to actually show you, if you go to the Kentucky Digital Library and you look in the collections, we are actually on the second page, and you'll see this light bulb because the work group did a lot of work on what are those things what are those skills, those information literacy skills that, that spectrum and those crossover skills, working from, say, like those benchmark years where you're coming out of primary, going into your middle grades, or going from middle to high school, or going from high school to post-secondary. What is happening here? And we wanted to sort of build these resources around those big goals of finding, evaluating, and using information in any subject area. So information literacy across the curriculum. So if you go into the collection, you can browse and you'll see some things that have already been added by our group, and some other folks have been sending some stuff in. So we are basically processing and curating that and getting it out there. So for instance, I've added excuse me, I just submitted and it has been reviewed and added this book review project. So if you are interested in looking at an item, basically, if you don't have a thumbnail or an icon, we would assign one to it for the primary skill that we're covering. Has a little short item description, and then it has the skills and standards. A little weirdness is that the document that you want is like this tiny link up at the top of the icon. But if you were to do that, it would download, and you can open it up and figure out if it's a something that you can adopt or something that you can that you can use in another context. And most of the stuff that's in here is going to be stuff that people are allowing you to adapt, just not for commercial use usually. All right, so over on the left, you can see that you can we've got these different limiters. So if you would like to submit something, we'd love for you to put your stuff in there. So, and it doesn't have to be something that is very complex. It can be, a handout that you've used, maybe a graphic organizer that you use, a game that you do, a lesson that you do, even the lesson that we just heard about, the method of, that process, you can actually write it up and stick it in here. So, but we want the things to be kind of promoting a KYVL resource. So you might say something like, well, when I'm working with nursing students, I show them CENL and talk about subject terms, and here's the lesson that goes with that. So the submission form link is right here on the gallery page, and it takes you to a LibWizard form, and it's going to ask you for basically the title and a short description. You're going to put this stuff in. Big thing is if you are the creator, it's going to ask you about what kind of licensing you want to use. And if you're not sure, it's going to sort of have a default setting. If you are sharing or adapting somebody else's Creative Commons material, you're just going to indicate where you got that material. And tell us, it can be a various types, formats, that kind of thing. Is it a slide deck? Is it a game? And anything you want to share, and will it work in an online environment or in person or both? You're going to upload your file, and if you have issues uploading the file, you can always, we'll contact you and we'll kind of work with you. There were some issues with my files when I uploaded because I had some images that did not pull through, some little charts. So sometimes there are issues, and we will work with you. The work group curators will work with you. The thumbnail, if you want to submit something, you notice that my activity just had a generic thumbnail on it or icon. You can choose either one if you've got a nice thumbnail you want to use. And then very important is to indicate any database or resource from KYVL that basically could be used with this activity. So if you have a scavenger hunt, if you have a lesson plan, anything, just name those databases. If you're doing a career project with students, you could put Learning Express Library in there. And you don't have to think of every database that would work. I usually try to put, 2 or 3 that I think, depending on what it is, would work with the activity. Your target audience, and I always like to tell people, of course, we're doing most of us are post-secondary, but if you think it could be easily adapted down to secondary or even middle grades, go ahead and click those boxes. And then you will select your ACRL frames, standards connected with that activity. If you are pulling it down into the K through 12 range, you can also select the standards that you think might apply to whatever resource you're putting in. And then you can make some notes down here at the bottom and put your contact information in. So it's pretty straightforward. It is pretty robust form because we want to make sure we've got all our ducks excuse me, in a row for copyright when we put it up onto the gallery, and making sure that, you know, it's most useful for people who are actually going to the gallery to find things. So I'm going to go out of here, go back here, and take any questions anybody has about submitting, or one more thing that I wanted to say though about this work group is, if you would like to be part of the work group, we are recruiting for, especially for the K through 12 group. You don't have to be a librarian to be in the group, but if you are interested in being involved, our task for this next year will be working with these submissions, communicating about the work that the group is doing, and doing outreach at conferences and other venues where we can kind of get the word out. So I'm going to stop sharing and just take questions. And there are some folks in this Zoom room who have done a tremendous amount of work on this as well in the past. So this is kind of the culmination of it.
I think it was nice that you shared that, Esther, because I didn't know that that particular database existed for sharing InfoLit resources.
Yeah.
I just knew KYVL shared different databases and stuff.
Yeah. Now, Enid Wolstein has been working on anything that she has created that is sort of a toolkit for some of the databases. She's working on getting that also added to that. So there's sort of two places. She's got a page right now at KYVL of all those, like how to use this database or intro to that, or what her stuff that she's created. So that's a good resource as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rachel's comment. Yeah, and I've put stuff in there that's a little more in depth, but you can do, you know, charts, just anything that you've got, rubrics. Give us rubrics, you know, for activities.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? No? Okay.
All
Well,
right.
thank you, Esther.
Thank you.
The final lightning talk in this session is by Jamie Collins from the University of Kentucky, and she's going to be talking about Metaliteracy, unlocking the Labyrinth. So Jamie, the floor is yours whenever you're ready to go.
Thank you. So my name is Jamie Collins. I am actually just starting my graduate work at University of Kentucky next month. So that's a lot of new there. And I also recently started in a new role as director of the Marion County Public Library. So I have a lot of moving parts at the moment, but this particular research, hang on here, let me share my screen. I apologize. I always feel super awkward trying to do this. Well, it won't let me click the share button. I apologize. There we go. Okay, so this particular research, Metaliteracy, I began as an undergrad at NKU.
Hold on, Jamie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We see the Zoom room. We don't see your slides.
Oh, shoot. Okay, hang on.
How about you turn off the share and then try resharing?
Stop sharing. Okay, how about that?
Now we see your PowerPoint slides.
Okay, all right. Sorry. So this particular research I began as an undergrad at NKU and is a topic that I have found particularly interesting. So let's get through it here. Okay, so metaliteracy is sort of the next evolution of information literacy, or even more of like another layer of information literacy. And so it really takes the ACRL 6 frames, but sort of turns it into something that is more spherical and interconnected versus a linear process or a boxed process. And it's extremely interesting, especially as now all of us are content creators. We're all producing information, whether that be for academic work, just on via social media and out there in the world. So metaliteracy allows the creator, which would be all of us, to be more reflective and thoughtful about what we are creating as we create it. And that also allows us to not just be learners, but also teachers, because all of us will develop certain skills that will benefit others. So metaliteracy characteristics are broken down into about 8 different areas, but they all correlate to existing ACRL frames. So that makes it, in my mind, very easy to integrate that into your sort of starter level or basic level information literacy class, like a 175 level, or even for high school students. So for example, collaborative and participatory are the first 2 metaliteracy characteristics, and then that will show you which of those frames it correlates to. For example, for participatory, that's going to relate to information has value, and that scholarship is conversation. And it just gives a connection that instead of thinking, okay, well, I'm going to source my information, or I understand that this academic research article has value, but what does that value mean to me as the person that is using it and sharing it? And so that adds a layer of accountability for the information that they share, as well as in the collaborative process where they are able to, really use more open sources and open viewpoints. Reflective and civic minded are 2 more of the metaliteracy characteristics. And again, you can see where that correlates to those ACRL frames. And it's just, like I said, when I envision this, I see it as almost like one of those globe things when you put your hands on it and you get the static electricity. It's something that where it just brings all of these things together, because as students are doing research or they're interacting with information, it's not just one thing, it's not linear. So all of these things are interconnected. And I think that that's really important for them to start thinking about it in terms of that as they, go through their academic career, whether that, ends at the undergrad level or beyond. So again, reflective, they're thinking about, well, what they're doing, how they're filling in those gaps, they're regulating their own learning. And of course, civic minded is, am I creating content that, has value in the social space? Is it meaningful? If I'm sharing that out on social media, is that something that, I'm going to be able to look back on and feel confident about what that content is? Open and adaptable. Again, those 2 things correlate very closely. Creating knowledge that's transparent, Adaptable, definitely, I think, especially at this point, is important because we have new technologies that are coming available all the time. AI and Chat GPT is definitely, on younger students' radar. I'm sure they're using that, whether they should or not, in an academic platform. So being able to anticipate what that means, using information that's generated that way, and how it may or may not fit into, into their academic career, is important, as well as things that will, be yet to come. Productive and informed. Again, is this information, is it repurposed? Am I applying, the right kind of technology to the content? Am I, informed on the origin and the accuracy and the reliability of the information before I'm using it or sharing it out there? And again, I just love that it gives the students something to tie back to that traditional information literacy education that they're going to be getting. And for those points that, they're going to be learning how to use that, this just adds another layer. Okay, so in this particular graphic, it just shows, how the collective you is at the center. We are all content creators. Obviously, beyond that, especially in the academic level, we're thinking about those information literacy frames, how we're using them, how to appropriately document those things. And then beyond that, Metaliteracy really incorporates all of that. And it's very 3D, very spherical. And so by thinking about that extra layer, it allows them to just have some extra self checks of, really being able to ask themselves, am I creating something of value? Am I doing something that is worthwhile before I actually submit or put it out there? So this stuff definitely kind of just sums it up. It's, it's all of these characteristics together that define a meta-literate learner. And all of this research had come from metaliteracy.org, which has very extensive information about the metaliteracy concepts, about how they correlate to the 6 frames. Obviously, this is just kind of an introduction to that, but I think that it's such a good opportunity to use it, especially in conjunction with those, initial information literacy classes. And by introducing that through a social media sort of method, that helps students, I think, really correlate these and see what makes sense. I did include in the notes a lesson plan. And so what that does, the lesson plan would certainly come kind of towards the end part of that class once they understand the basics. But it does allow them to use preferred social media platform as an outlet for that. And they're able to work in a small group. So you can certainly click on that link there. And I did also include an infographic that just sort of, it's more linear as far as how each of those frames match up with the metaliteracy characteristics. And then here are some additional sources there that go into a much more in-depth look at metaliteracy. I will be doing a full-length conference or workshop on this at the KLA conference. So we'll get into the details a little bit more. But I hope that this makes sense. It's kind of a heady concept in a way, but I like I said, I think that there's a lot of opportunities for people to introduce that into, introduce that into information literacy instruction, as well as for high school students. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts about this? one question.
Where did you get the inspiration to use Metaliteracy?
I had actually discovered the metaliteracy.org site, which Trudy Jacobson and Tom Mackey, I think it's like SUNY Albany is where they do most of their research. I had just come across it through an academic article that I was doing that I had read for an independent study. And so that sort of sparked my interest in it. And I thought it was a really interesting concept. They had actually submitted metaliteracy concepts as something to be included with the ACRL framework in, I guess that would have been like 2016. And it didn't quite make the cut per se, but they do offer a free Coursera course that, does teach more of those, an in-depth look at more of the concepts and things like that. But I just think it's extremely interesting. And like I said, most people approach, their academic life, their personal life from a multitude of angles. And I just think it's a wonderful way to be able to think sort of holistically about the entire process in order to just, to have a broader view of what you're creating and what you're putting out there.
Okay, cool. Any other follow-up questions for Jamie or Whitney or Esther? Andrea
Thank you.
agrees that it's a very holistic approach to information literacy.
Thank you, Andrea. She's in my corner. Appreciate it.
All right, hearing none, saying none, we'll give you back about 20 minutes of your day before we resume at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Central Time for our next round of presentations.